I was in Portland with a friend at the Ellen show, and I walked past you, and you're very distinct looking. So I said to my friend, I go, "That's the mayor of McMinnville." She's like, "How do you even know that?" I said, I know things. So I went over and introduced myself and told you about the podcast and asked you if you wanted to be on it. And here we are. Full circle. Here we are. Recoding.
Yeah. Social behavior is one of the ways that we can recode our society. So when we went to this show, what we didn't know was that it was Ellen's last stand-up.
Right.
We also didn't know that they were taping for her Netflix show or whatever. And so when we got there, they made us lock our phones in these little bags. And you got to keep it with you, but you couldn't unlock it yourself.
Yeah.
I am sure that caused more anxiety for more people than any of us could possibly imagine. I don't remember what we had going on at the city, but I was like, I have 2 cell phones. I was like, I can't lock up my city phone right now. And then I was like, you have got to be able to like disconnect for an hour. It's going to be okay.
Right.
But to your point, we may not have met if we didn't have to lock our phones up.
Maybe.
This episode is brought to you by the Vintages Trailer Resort, offering premier Airstream glamping located an hour from Portland in Oregon's famed Willamette Valley wine country. The Vintages features 34 totally unique, fully restored, and custom fabricated trailer accommodations for a nostalgic stay that's decidedly modern. With trailers dating from the 1940s, each stay includes comfortable and creative floor plans and modern furnishings, as well as a variety of unique features on the property to enjoy, like outdoor grills and complimentary cruiser bikes. A welcoming general store stocked with local wine, beer, and picnic provisions, and a seasonal outdoor pool and communal fireside area. Now included in all stays, the Vintages Tasting Passport program connects guests with discounted wine tasting and bottle purchases at over a dozen local wineries, breweries, and distilleries. Book before October 31st and enjoy 15% off your stay with promo code FALL at www.the-vintages.com to reserve today.
Alrighty, it is time to stop hitting snooze and awaken to a life worth being, the fun and inspiring podcast that dives deep into what makes life truly fulfilling. I'm your host, Sue Willoughby, a self-proclaimed badass transformational life coach for women over 40. Join me as I explore the extraordinary journeys of ordinary people who've transformed their lives from the inside out. Tune in weekly to uncover the secrets to smashing through your perceived limits and creating a life that's not just well lived, but totally worth being. I want to welcome you to today's episode of A Life Worth Being. And my guest today really embodies the essence of my podcast and that title. She is a queer winemaker. She co-founded the Wine Country Pride and is also the host of Queer Wine Fest, which I think is in its 3rd year?
We just celebrated our 3rd year.
Awesome. And did I mention that she's also the mayor of McMinnville? Please welcome Remy Drabkin to the podcast. That's a lot.
It's a lot.
That is a lot. I mean, any one of those things in and of themselves would be a lot.
Yeah.
So we have a lot to talk about today.
Okay.
I'd like to start with the winery. We're here at Remy Wines. For those of you who are watching on YouTube, we are in the tasting room at Remy Wines in Dayton, Oregon. And I was fortunate enough to be able to come down here and spend the morning with Remy before her day gets really crazy and active.
My day's already been really crazy and active, but
Or are you repairing a tractor? We're on a number of other things, I'm sure that...
I had a great meeting this morning. I had some good phone calls earlier.
All right.
Yeah.
You get started early, I'm guessing.
I start early.
Yeah. Do you go late as well?
Yeah. I start early and go late.
Okay.
Yeah. But yes, it is nice to be here. This is creating a calmness in my morning. I wouldn't normally sit down.
We can do some meditation if you'd like as well. Would that help?
Some neck stretches and some meditation while we're talking since I'm seated.
Perfect.
Okay.
Perfect. Well, thank you I know that you're like getting ready for harvest. You're also in the middle of a re-election campaign for mayor.
True.
So that's just adding to you're like at this buffet and your plate is really full.
Yes.
Right? And you're probably going to go back for seconds and thirds, I'm guessing.
I keep a full plate.
Yeah. Okay. So let's talk about when you started the winery in 2006.
2006.
Right? Yeah, that's a while ago.
It is.
Yeah.
We just celebrated 18 years.
Congratulations. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I agree. What can I tell you? I started the winery. I wanted to be a winemaker since I was very young. I grew up in this area. The wine industry was fairly nascent, so I grew up with it, and it's what I aspired to do. I started working in wine in 1995, and in 2006, I started a small brand, Remy Wines, while I was working multiple other jobs to support my winemaking habit. And I'd been making my own wines for some time, actually in this house. So I produced wines for a few years out of here, just for friends and family, things of that nature. And I started the winery officially in 2006. And since then we've grown, but I've kept it intentionally small. So we don't follow a traditional model, of course. I mean, I feel like that's predictable. That's a predictable thing for me to say. We don't follow a traditional model. So we're very small. We only produce 2,500 cases of wine per year, which is a drop in the bucket. But we aren't in traditional distribution channels. And so because of that, and being essentially all direct to consumer, with a few partners around the country, including in Washington and California. But because of that, we have a larger staff. And then because we have this larger staff, despite our size, we're really able to flex and do a lot of different things, including things like hosting the world's first queer wine fest and being an incubator for this. We've actually incubated 2 nonprofits and another business in another industry, as well as starting these really high impact events. So yeah, here we are 18 years later. My production hasn't grown tremendously, but I'm now running this very values-based company. We started with the motto, Old World Style Wines. Now we still maintain that for the Remy Wines brand. But our new company motto is Small Winery, Big Impact.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
I like that too. Because we've done a lot. I didn't even talk about all the reasons why that's justified.
Yeah, I was just going to get to that. I'd love to know, like, when you talk about being impactful, what does that mean to you?
Well, there are things that we put into practice on a daily basis about how we approach personnel, company competency, cultural competency. And I think that we've been impactful because we've been, I've led the company in a way in which I'm listening to my community about what's of importance and then working on how I can create the infrastructure to implement that. I believe in both, for both my wine work, well, I believe across the board, a lot of our big fixes to life are really based in how we code things. And if we want to change outcomes, then we have to change how we've coded life. And whether that's government or a company, how do you run a successful small company? And so high impact. when we did our adaptive reuse project on our 1970s tractor barn, the only structural change we made to the outside was to add some gables to make sure that all the offices had natural light in them. That was done specifically for employee health and well-being. We did a lot of internal design and engineering that were intended to create less hardship, not only on our bodies, but on the long-term life of our equipment. I believe in that a lot. Makes me sour about my tractor being in an accident this morning. I do believe in that type of maintenance to, in order to have this healthy build. We do some obvious, maybe more obvious things like company health insurance and a savings plan. Those are no small feat for a winery of our size, though. We're working towards our B Corp certification, which is just kind of a way of holding ourselves accountable for the practices we have in place. We're a live certified vineyard. We do the entire barn remodel. We were actually written up as because of the environmental impact or lack of environmental impact. The culmination, or the most high impact thing that we did was in the process of that remodel. Myself, along with a team of people, invented a carbon-sequestering structural concrete. It could change the world. I mean, it could really, it could be one of the highest impact things that we do in terms of climate change. And it's completely attainable and achievable. And so now, like my winery incubated this new product. It became a new business that I have no financial investment in, but then through my mayoral role, I've been able to flex and help get state dollars invested for continued research in carbon neutral concrete. And it's so important because concrete is responsible for somewhere between 7 and 9% of the world's total CO2 emissions.
Wow.
It's the most used product by humans behind water.
Interesting.
So I like
surprised, but interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. So and it's highly, I mean, it pollutes in many other ways as well. And it's very fossil fuel intensive. Every aspect of it is fossil fuel intensive. The product that we released actually has these other layers of good because it was using pyrolyzed municipal waste as an aggregate in the cement. So it's it's destroying, it's destroying PFAS, it's capturing heavy metals and pharmaceuticals that might otherwise be spread back into ag fields, affecting our water table, our food sources, and it sequestered carbon. So my 5,000 square foot slab sequestered over 5 tons of CO2 emissions.
Wow, that's amazing.
It's a lot to try to sum up in a couple sentences. But that's what I mean when I say big impact. You know, creation of potentially world-saving product. And
it's generational.
And it's regional. It's not just a lot of the things I do, it's not just a McMinnville fix, it's a regional fix. In fact, so I figure if I talk too long, you'll just cut things out of here. So this morning I was meeting with the executive director of an organization that runs many of our shelters and our food bank system. And we're working hard to get the city's first navigation center, which is our first low barrier emergency shelter, trauma-informed design, working hard to get it open. There have been hiccups along the way. So, we're coming together. We got to get this thing, we got to finish the project. And when we walk up to the coffee shop, they had a metal gate blocking the line where the line normally goes. So, it's like you usually walk in here and you curve this way up to the bar. Metal gate's blocking it. So everybody in front of us just starts walking against the flow of traffic and then backing up towards the metal gate. I mean, it's like a little tiny thing, right? So I pick it up and I move it to the side. And the executive director was like, of course, you're just going to fix it. And I was like, yes, but you see, when I fixed it, I didn't just fix it for myself. I fixed it for everybody that came behind me. Right. And that is kind of how I approach the things that we're doing both in the wine industry and in government. It's not myopic. It's meant to have broader impact, to fix government systems that are exclusionary, that affect not just McMinnville and McMinnville residents, but affect our region. So I do a lot of big picture thinking. Yeah. And implementation, which is better than the thinking.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about, I fixed it for those that come behind me.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. Otherwise,
Well, that's not the typical way of thinking. It's like, what can I do to solve this problem for myself? A lot of people think that way.
Yeah, no, we've got to have long-term thinking.
Yes.
And, my mayoral role as well, I'm head of our utility. And when we're planning for utilities, we're not talking about 5 and 10-year plans. I mean, we might have a 5-year strategic plan, but it's linked to a 50-year plan. Our water systems and things of that nature. I mean, that's long-term thought and development. And so I think I think the combination of my nature combined with the demands of this job have made me really pull back that lens of how do we fix these things that are coded to create poor outcomes and to get them start creating better outcomes.
I love the word coded. You've used it a couple of times now.
It's new. It's a new language is so important. Yeah. It's part of when I speak publicly. I sometimes I talk about language. I talk about how it can interfere or advance progress, interfere with or advance. And I started coming to that recently. First, very literally, we saw the first great project happen in McMinnville where we changed some housing code years ago. It was some of the first work that I did in housing. I focused primarily on housing through my mayoral work, housing, economic development, good governance. Those are my campaign points, but that's because that's what I work on, in and on. But we changed this code, and what happened was that when this apartment building in McMinnville burnt down, when it rebuilt, it leaned into all that code change. And so it rebuilt with more units in the exact same footprint. They were more spacious and more beautiful. They used different building structures and things that were not previously allowed. And it all came online as dedicated affordable housing. So they had 14 families placed before it was even open. And just, so very thoughtful things. So when I was talking at the ribbon cutting, I spoke a little bit about the code. And I said, nobody wants to hear about how you're changing code to address housing. And as I was giving that kind of off the cuff remarks, I started thinking about coding in this greater context because it does apply to so much of the work that I do. And I think it's a great description. And, we usually put it into computer systems and things like that. But I think that's also why it's palatable, because we understand that you code a computer to get a certain outcome, whether or not we know how to do that coding. I think that's more generally, it's part of the lexicon. So yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, we have to recode our systems for justice.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. Okay, you're very thoughtful and you're very intentional with how you run your business and how you run your city. And I know that you have been a tireless public servant for a really long time. And you said you started with housing. I know that that you were appointed initially to the mayoral role, and then unanimously elected. Right? Was that something that you had thought about? Like, I want to be the mayor someday, or was it?
Yes and no. I started my public service in 2011. I still very much consider myself a public servant. Mayor is a full-time volunteer job in the city of McMinnville.
Is it? Really?
Yes.
Okay.
I do a minimum of 40 hours a week of volunteerism for the city.
Okay.
And really more, because you're never not mayor. You're always mayor.
Right.
I'm mayor 100% of the time. So when I applied for the Planning Commission in 2011, which was when I started with the city, then mayor asked me in the interview process, by the way, which I have completely reformed, is completely different now, and great new outcomes, including lots of intentional participation in interview processes. I've changed the way we advertise it, the way we do the interviews, the whole framework of it. But when he was interviewing me in the old system, in which you were interviewed by the council during a public meeting in front of everybody, and then they deliberated about you in front of everybody before they selected who would be appointed to the planning commission.
No pressure there.
No pressure there. So when I was going through that very exclusionary practice of trying to be a public servant, he asked me about the reasons for running. And really I was running, or I'd applied for the position because of some NIMBYism in my community that I didn't feel represented, the McMinnville that I loved and knew, and didn't want that, so I wanted to raise my voice and also be effective at making sure that we could put good housing projects forward. It was a habitat development that neighbors came out against, which was really too bad. But I said to the mayor at that point, in my response, I said, well, so I can sit in your seat one day, sir. And then I did 2 terms on planning commission. I did 2 terms on council. And when I was in that second term on council, I definitely went through a phase where I thought, no, I don't want to be mayor, because it's all of this work I'm doing already, plus it's all this additional work. And, you lose your vote. And because we have six counselors and the mayor, so I only vote in a tie. You lose your vote, and and it's all of that work, and it's still a volunteer position. I mean, that was informative as a small business owner too, of like, how can I handle that? But then our former governor appointed me as a director on a state board, and so I added that, and then the council elected me council president. So then I was council president, which is essentially like vice mayor. Okay. And then I had this other government position, and when I kind of looked at all of that, I was like, well, I'm doing all that much already. Right. That was not true. That was not accurate. I do a lot more now. But that's how I had decided that was manageable within my life. And so then when the mayor before me stepped down early, I was, as you said, unanimously appointed, and then I ran in the following election. So it was a very natural pathway, I think. And council president, I mean, that job is to be the mayor in the mayor's stead when mayor can't be mayor. So yeah, I feel like I wanted it in a way for a long time, but it was never about the position. It was kind of about my level of preparedness and where I could be useful. And that's still that's why I'm running for re-election. It's not so that I can have the title of mayor, although not bad. But that's not why. It's because I am very effective and very useful. And it's a way that I can not just serve my community, but that I can improve my community.
Yeah. Well, did you leave McMinnville and then come back?
Multiple times.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you're here now.
I'm here now.
Right.
Yes, I graduated from high school in 3 years. I was itching to get out of McMinnville. I went and lived in Israel on a kibbutz, and then lived in Jerusalem after that for a while. I had 2 jobs. I worked in a youth hostel and I worked in a restaurant. And so I worked at the youth hostel in exchange for lodging at the youth hostel, and worked at the restaurant for spending money. And then I I was supposed to go work at an Israeli winery. I'd already been working in wine. Okay. I was supposed to go work at an Israeli winery. And then I realized right before I was supposed to go that because I was a woman, they wouldn't actually let me touch the wine. It was all kosher wine. And so I would be probably stuck, I'd be stuck in a room, whether it was stuck in a lab or stuck in an office. I didn't care. I wanted to make wine there. And I applied to the Lycée Viticole de Beaune. mid-semester, I oddly got in. I could go down a whole storytelling on that, but I moved to France, to Burgundy, and started studying winemaking there. And then I came back. I made really good friends there. I didn't have the best experience. I came back to my high school sweetheart. Her last name was Red Wine. I knew we were meant to be together. It really was. It really is.
Oh my God.
It really is. Yeah. So I came back. We got back together, and was here for about a year. Went back to working in wine, and then she got a full ride to Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, and so I jumped on a train with her, and we moved to Pittsburgh, broke up 3 months later, but I stayed there for three and a half years, and worked in an Italian restaurant and bakery. We made wine in the basement.
Nice.
And very formative years, like 19, 20, 21. Mm-hmm. So maybe, around there, 22. So very impactful in my life. And then I came back to Oregon in 2003, and here we are.
Yeah. Well, you came home, and you clearly care about your community, and that's why you're here. And that's why you've built your business and working to improve your community. Because I can tell that, your heart is clearly here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Obviously.
You wouldn't be here.
I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing all this. People ask me, they're like, well, so a number of people have said, don't worry about the election, you're a shoo-in. And I'm like, that's the most dangerous thing you could possibly say.
Right.
This is a real race. I'm really running contended, and I'm not a shoo-in. And so then some friends have said, like, well, what will you do if you lose, And
yeah, because you have, what are you going to do? It's like you don't have anything else in your life going on.
Yeah.
What would you do without that
How would I possibly...
40 hours a week?
Yeah.
That's a good question.
Yeah. I'll be fine.
Okay. Yeah, I thought you might
My business would love some of my attention.
I'm sure.
My friends would love some of my attention. I did a mayoral fellowship. There's two things that have happened that I've been very proud of that are separate and apart from the work, but that have been quite individual. Mm-hmm. Markers, and one of them was being selected to do a mayoral fellowship at Harvard Graduate School of Design. So it was open to every mayor. And I applied, obviously, but only 8 people were selected from across the U.S. That was an amazing experience. But I was also invited to apply for another fellowship. So, if I couldn't do that and mayor, so I could do that. I could just invest myself in my business and my relationship. Just. Yes.
It's a lot of investment you got going on there.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. Wow. Yeah. So the race, we won't talk about that. But
okay, great.
I don't
need to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm glad that you're, taking it seriously and not sitting back.
Oh, it's another job.
It's another job.
It's another job. It's just a job I don't particularly want to have.
Right.
But I have to have it in order to get the job I want.
Yeah. Exactly.
So.
Well, I hope the support is there, and I wish you all the luck with that.
Thank you.
Because I don't want you to have too much free time. So there's that.
Yeah, that would be terrible.
Tell me, what have been your biggest challenges? Either in the wine industry, as a queer winemaker, as a mayor, as an openly queer mayor.
All of them. I don't think anything out of what you would expect to hear, and it's the same throughout industry. Mm-hmm.
Which industry? The wine industry?
Wine industry, government, all of it. It's those exact things. Challenges because I'm a woman, challenges because I'm gay, challenges because I have this haircut, challenges. For real.
No,
challenges because of my age or my perceived age. And on both sides of that spectrum, which is really interesting as at this stage of life to recognize that what I now am is still too young for some people and too old for others. That feels unique.
Okay.
but so I don't think any great departures from there. Early on, kind of figuring out how to run my business while not being a man and in a very much man's world, that took a lot. I'm a very direct person, and as I matured in business, I just really leaned into that directness, and I lean into it in government too. Usually that serves me, not always. But I mean, there have been times I've done whole interviews that were about the challenges I faced just as a woman in the wine industry. I think some of the most disappointing challenge would be when I get kickback from community that's not doing anything or is insulting the way I'm doing something but not leaning in. And that, I tire of
Tell
that
me more
pretty
about
quickly.
that. So can you give me an example?
Queer Wine Fest, for instance, which is, I will say it's not just, so Queer Wine Fest, never before a queer wine festival. Lots of invitations as a queer winemaker to come pour wine in the lobby of your hotel during June. Okay. Thanks.
Yeah.
I appreciate that for the exposure. Yes.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So the establishment of Queer Wine Fest not only gave a home to anchor the queer impact on the world of wine, and it's not just Oregon, we're highlighting queer winemakers from all over. It created a professional network within the world of wine of queer winemakers and wine industry folk that did not exist before. 3.5 years ago, I could not have told you the names of 5 other queer winemakers. I could have maybe come up with 1 or 2, and I wouldn't be sure if they were out and.
Yeah, interesting.
And so it's created that professional network. It's created that home and that like historical or archival aspect. But it's also had moments when it's had some kind of, I don't know, almost cannibalism from within the queer. So I'll tell you one, I've got a very specific example. We had somebody that identified as a older gay man troll all of our Instagram handles in the lead up to Queer Wine Fest because we called it Queer Wine Fest, and he was offended by the word queer. And we tried to respond in a loving, kind way of acknowledging that, a lot of the broader LGBTQIA community has reclaimed the word queer, and that this is a movement that is not new, that, it is rooted, talk about 90s in Seattle, right? So, we kind of set that up, and that this was our naming of it, and it resonated with a lot of people, and it was not meant to harm, and we're sorry if it had unintended emotional consequences for him, and hoped that we could acknowledge that and move forward, but he did not stop. He kept trolling our Instagram handles, attacking us publicly, but also writing us messages saying he was going to come down and protest. He was letting all his gay friends know not to buy my wine again, ever again. That's cannibalism. Yeah. That's what I mean. Why? Finest. What is wrong? What did you accomplish? And we even said, we encourage you to come and see the festivities for yourself. Like, here's the ticket link. Yeah. I'm not giving you a ticket for trolling me, but I would say that's what I mean. And there's a lot of examples of that. Okay. So, and that's difficult because I think sometimes I'm like, what else could I do for you? I am living this life of service. Why is it not good enough? And what did you do? So those challenges are hardest for me because they bring out something that's not innate in me, which is those challenges can make me kind of bitter. I also try not to focus on those things too much. So I let go of things very so quickly. People will be like, well, do you really want to do that? You remember when they did this, that, and the other? And I'll be like, no, I don't remember that at all. I totally let go of it. It's not important in my life.
I don't have time to retain that kind of information.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. But we do see like all these other successes. So there were a lot of us that made a very loud, strong call to action within the wine industry early on to really start talking about DEI. And it was, I mean, a lot has happened over the last number of years, I think probably in most industries. But for those of us that were exceptionally vocal, which includes my friend Rachel Adams that you have spoken with, who started Assemblage, and includes my friend Miriam Ahmed, who's on the cover of Wine Enthusiast in the other room. It's the same edition that I'm in. We're both named as the Future 40 most impactful. It's Wine Enthusiast Future 40 of America, and it's the 40 most influential people in the world of wine. Mm-hmm. So it was a very big honor.
I was just going to say, that is an incredible honor.
It also, I had wanted, because of, I saw the work that I was doing. So I had wanted to be included in that list. It used to be called 40 Under 40. Uh-huh. And I turned 40 and I wasn't, as you know, I kind of gave up on it because I was like, well, I'm 40. So I've now aged out of this thing because remember, now I'm old. And then part of the impact of the work that we were doing, because what we were talking about, we weren't only talking about racism and sexism and homophobia. We were talking about biased language, having to do with ability and access to tasting rooms, whether that was language access in printed materials or who's working in your tasting room. And we weren't only talking about Spanish and English, although that was a lot of conversation here based on our demographics, but we were thinking more broadly, how do we change the world of language around physical ability and creating access to wine in these environments which often aren't very friendly to people, especially with mobility issues or there's just not a lot of access. So we really focused on that. And part of that conversation also had to do with ageism. And I think that this large group of people, this is not just the few I mentioned, there were many of us across the country that were kind of pushing. And the result of that was that wine enthusiasts changed their 40 under 40 and kind of let go of the idea that you had to be under 40 years old to be doing relevant and impactful work. And now as we, just this year's article just came out again, there's 2 local winemakers here, Mimi Castile and Sofia Torres, who are incredible, and the work they're doing is so phenomenal. Sophia also has a nonprofit that she started that's making large-scale regional impact and improving lives. Mimi is a genius farmer. Neither of them are under 40. So, like there are those success stories that you start seeing in ways that, that's changing the coding.
Yeah.
Right? We changed the coding.
Back to the coding.
Yeah. And then we started getting outcomes that recognize really broad impact. And it wasn't just kind of I don't want to diminish anybody that came before on the list, but it broadened the scope, not only in terms of age. Like this year's list, it acknowledges people impacting the world of wine that are impacting in a variety of ways. Mm-hmm. Professors, etc.
Well, congratulations for getting on the list.
Thanks.
Even though you're old now. You've recoded it. That's great.
I'm only old to some people. To some people, I'm very young. Okay.
Age is just a number. It is.
That's what I say about population. Population is just a number. And then I relate it to age and tell people why it shouldn't impact our things like ability to access philanthropic funds, because it's just a number.
Yeah.
It's a whole other tangent I have, but we don't have time to go into all my tangents.
The other thing I wanted to ask you about is, so those are some of your challenges. What is maybe your top 2? I mean, you've also kind of woven them in. You're biggest accomplishments that you really...
Rachel told me to weave them in.
Rachel.
My biggest
Go,
accomplishment
Rachel.
today, I talked about the 2 things that she wanted me to be sure to talk about. That's my biggest accomplishment of the day. No, we talked about it. Rachel and I talked about it. So that mayoral, that Harvard fellowship was tremendous. I had that back to back with being asked to be a part of a delegation of U.S. women mayors that went to Switzerland for a week to study urban design and government. So I came out of this intensive study, semester-long fellowship at Harvard that was all about, we never talked about it in terms of changing the coding, but that's what it was about. And it was really an in-depth look at how land use law and infrastructure has been used to create and segregate our society. So it really gave me an inside look into examining our own laws in McMinnville. There was the stuff that was more obvious early on, but to start peeling back some of those layers, I worked on a real project through Harvard GSD, and that project is coming to fruition right now. And it's a visionary mixed-use redevelopment of a former industrial site into residential and commercial housing, but prioritizing having a mixed income economy on the site. That is forcing the development teams that are coming forward to be thoughtful and creative in how the site is used and potentially to partner because we want that different outcome. So learning a lot about that coding that has existed over time that's impacted the way our entire world is developed. And that kind of goes back to that language conversation we were having earlier, that language is a large part of that, you know. When I think about language around land use, you know, I think of words, you know, currently like inclusionary zoning, but also exclusionary zoning. I like to ask the question, if exclusionary zoning was allowed, why isn't inclusionary zoning allowed? People don't love that question. But, you know, federal interstate highway system, that's language that affected land use, that had real societal impacts, that segregated our nation by race and created poor health, educational, and societal outcomes for communities of color. And you know, that was land use law.
Interesting. Yeah.
So that was the ability to do that program was a huge success. And I feel like there are 2 times in my life currently. There's a time before I went to Harvard and there's a time after. And interesting too, because I got backlash, you know, because higher ed is not a universal good in all people's minds.
Yeah.
So that was also really interesting, and trying to balance presenting to my community opportunities to improve systems, but also to do it in a way in which the community was evaluating and also deciding about what to move forward. So it wasn't just me and some dictum of this is how we'll do things now. And the other big thing that we had talked about was the wine enthusiast. And I think I laid out the reasons why that was so much that culmination of seeing intensity happen around what equity really means in the wine industry. That was really good. I mentioned the concrete too, but the concrete really does have this incredible potential impact. So my big vision on the concrete is we create regional waste systems because not every wastewater system plant could handle the cost of putting in this full drying and then pyrolization, burning without oxygen at very high temperatures for a long time. But we could have a regional system that theoretically would not cost cities more because we already pay to remove our treated wastewater. But what I mentioned earlier, we pay to have our treated wastewater as fertilizer, right? So it gets spread on ag fields, and that's where it's going. You've got toxins going back into our water table, growing our food. So a regional waste system, McMinnville, we dry our wastewater, let's say theoretically, after it's treated. And so do all these surrounding areas. And we drive it to, Wilsonville, where they can pyrolyze all of that waste because they've got that larger equipment. What that produces is a pure carbon substance. Essentially, it looks almost like if you looked at charcoal that looked like pea gravel. That's kind of what it looks like. But that carbon's not being released again. Like even if I smash it and throw it in the air, that is not CO2 emissions going back into the air.
Interesting.
And that pyrolyzation does kill PFAS, which are the plastics that are in all of our blood now that we don't know how to get rid of. And from that point, then you've got this aggregate that can be added to the concrete, which is this terrible polluting substance that, when you start seeing infrastructure, I think it's like how they say pregnant women see pregnant women. You start looking at concrete is everywhere. It is everywhere. It is the foundation of every house. It is the sidewalk, the driveways, the streets, the bridges. It is everywhere. Yeah. So imagine then we design our city codes to demand some level of carbon neutrality, and some cities are already doing this. Then we've got, here's the aggregate. It's already had methane avoidance, carbon emissions avoidance. We're already doing better. But now we have this product and it's still going to the free market, and you concrete, person, you can bid on this job just like everybody else could before. And now you've got this open source formula, which was my part of the development of the product, was keeping it open source. Now you've got this open source formula. Here's the product. All you have to do is meet the code. Everybody bids. You're not interrupting that free market aspect of it. And you're creating a better outcome because then our sidewalks are carbon sequestering instead of polluting. And it's just a better, large regional system. That is very much within reach because all of that technology is here.
Right.
We just need to
use it.
And build the connections. I hosted a mayor's sustainability tour here the other day just to start talking about this. A lot of times I feel like in government, that's how we get things done. We just talk about it.
Yeah.
Talk it into being.
Talk it into being.
Yeah. How are my short answers for you?
Awesome.
What's amazing is I eventually get back to the question.
Right. That's okay. That's okay. I have a question, and it may or may not be a short answer, but it's an obvious question that I have had in my mind since I thought about interviewing you, and that is, and there's a Japanese word called ikigai.
It's a restaurant in Carlton that just opened called Ikigai.
Okay. So you are doing so many things, so many amazing things. How do you keep going? What is your source of energy from within?
Well, I get a lot from sun and water. I think those are big inputs. But I'm not. But in reality, they are. So I get a lot of relief or kind of meditation from being in water. So, whether that's a little cold plunge or a hot soak. I need to run pretty much every morning of my life. If I don't do something like that, I really feel it almost immediately. So, I'm a believer in that, physical health is mental health. For me, physical health is mental health, and it's important for me to keep up my physicality. Otherwise I get depressed really quickly.
So self-care.
Self-care.
Is one. Okay.
Look at that. You like
You just nailed it, right?
You nailed
It's
it.
like, boom, bullet point, right there.
Self-care. I mean, that's the key, right? It's self-care. And then
It is, but there's other internal motivation.
Yeah.
So you have to have the fuel for your body.
Yeah.
Like what you're saying, right?
Yes.
Keep your body in shape so that you can then physically have the energy to have your mind be in the right place, in the right space. Am I interpreting that correctly?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
But why do you do this?
Oh, why do I do it? Well, I am here at this very unique moment in time, and my life has taken me on a path where I have this opportunity to make large-scale impact and improve tens of thousands of other people's lives. And they'll never know it, but that's what I get to do. Maybe more than that. Maybe hundreds of thousands of people. I don't know. Yeah. But that's it.
Thank you for doing that.
Yeah. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a great answer. I appreciate it. Yeah. Remy, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate you letting me come down here. And special thanks to Rachel Adams from Play Nice PR for making this all happen, because I know it was a big orchestration on her part and on your part because you have so much going on. And today's sponsor of the show, which I'll talk about a little bit more later on, the Vintages. I had the opportunity to stay in this beautifully restored vintage, I won't even call it a trailer. It's a motorhome. It's an
Airstream, isn't it? Is the one you stayed in an Airstream?
Spartan Manor.
Oh, the Spartan Manor.
Yeah.
Oh, right, with the outdoor soaking tub.
1956, yes. And it is this very sweet little vintage trailer resort. And I got on my cruiser bike last night and rode up and down the street. It was just like, I think I was also kind of born in the wrong time. I should have been in the 50s, but there's no way I would have been a housewife in some little bullet bra thing, making dinner for, that's not going to happen, right?
Yeah.
But all of those things that I love so much from that era, it was great. So
excellent.
Thank you for all of that.
They've been a great promoter of Queer Wine Fest. They've been our lodging partner for the last 3 years as well. So they've offered discounted room rates for any of our guests attending Queer Wine Fest. And I won't speak
Hopefully
on
I can make it next year.
Yeah,
I know when I ran into you which is kind of a funny thing. Can I just tell this?
Yeah, you should tell the story. This is because it emphasizes, I think, that also the essence of your podcast, which is like you lean into life's opportunities.
I do.
Yeah.
I try to. Well, I saw you on the cover of, I think it was Northwest Winemaker or something.
Great Northwest Wine, I think.
Something, yeah. And I was in Walla Walla, at my place in Walla Walla, which is also another wine community. And I was like, wow, she looks really interesting. And I read your story and I'm like, wow, really interesting story, queer winemaker. And at that time I was planning on having a podcast, and I put you right up there in the top of my podcast guest list. Fast forward a couple years later, I was in Portland with a friend at the Ellen show, and I walked past you, and you're very distinct looking. So I was like, wait a minute, I know her. I said to my friend, I go, that's the mayor of McMinnville. She's like, how do you even know that? I said, I know things. So I went over and introduced myself and told you about the podcast and asked you if you wanted to be on it. And there we are. Full circle. Here we are.
And here
Recoding.
We are. Yeah.
So thank you again.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Social behavior is one of the ways that we can recode our society, though, right? Interactions are so important.
Yes.
Yeah.
So this is another thing. Okay, my turn to be.
Okay, you go.
Yeah, my turn. My turn to talk. You're funny. No, I've been thinking about that because during the pandemic, right, we were so locked down, and we just, we all craved that human connection that we all had. I mean, like just hugging other people or shaking hands or doing whatever. And we were so isolated, and now we're not. We're coming out of our shells, and we're, but there's this weird, some people just still, now that we're allowed to be around other humans in close proximity, we're not quite sure how to do it. It's like we have to go through this rehumanization process. Does that make any sense to you? And so I think, and initially I was just shocked at people's behavior when we started to interact again. I do think there's some recoding that needs to be done there, seriously. So it's interesting.
So I think that, one of the things is that like you can affect social behavior through urban design or just design in general, right? A lot of times we talk about kind of getting individuals to change their behavior, or if we could just change your thinking, my thinking. But I think if we like pull back, how do we affect on a larger scale system? Well, how are our gathering spaces designed? Do they allow for easy interactions? So that was something that we talked a lot about in Switzerland. There was a lot of exterior pathways that had some level of covering. And it was very intentional to keep people using the sidewalks and those pathways. I didn't let you have your turn very long.
No, that was it. It's just been something that's been on my mind recently. And as I interact with people, I just want to take that opportunity to connect with people. The server at the restaurant, just talk to them, just have a conversation. And, whatever it is, people in the streets, just have interactions and just make someone's life better. Or just interact with them in a way that they feel seen. I think that's so important.
So when we met, when we went to this show, this live show, what we didn't know was that it was Ellen's last stand-up.
Right.
We also didn't know that they were taping for her Netflix show or whatever.
Yeah.
And so when we got there, they made us lock our phones in these little bags. And you got to keep it with you, but you couldn't unlock it yourself.
Yeah.
I am sure that caused more anxiety for more people than any of us could possibly imagine. I don't remember what we had going on at the city, but I was like, I have 2 cell phones. I was like, I can't lock up my city phone right now. And then I was like, you have got to be able to like disconnect for an hour. It's going to be okay. But to your point, we may not have met if we didn't have to lock our phones up.
Maybe.
Right? Because it changed the way that space was used, right? So it's your point and my point, right? But it changed that there are small design things. And it was taking that away, but it allowed that space, that lobby space, to be how it was intended, which was conversational. Yeah. So it wasn't there wasn't awkward for you to come over, or etc. Like it was an inviting situation. Yeah.
Because you weren't there like on your phone. Like
I wasn't there on my phone. I wasn't in a corner. I wasn't isolated.
There with your mom.
I was there with my mom. But you see, even in like some of the way that we've adapted, it's to be more isolated. Think about how airports are often set up now and how the seating in airports is set up. We want to be compartmentalized away. That's the intent of the design, is to compartmentalize us away from one another.
Yeah, interesting. I hadn't thought about that. Yeah.
It's everywhere.
It is everywhere.
Oh.
I know, and I think that they should take our phones away from us when we go into restaurants, because how many people do you see sitting at a table across from each other? There are only 2 people at that table and they're on their phones.
This episode of A Life Worth Being is brought to you by the Vintages Trailer Resort, an Airstream glamping oasis in Oregon's Willamette Valley. Each of their 34 vintage trailer accommodations have been lovingly refurbished with custom redesigns, so you can pick the retro trailer that speaks to you. Fans of classic American design will love the 1948 Westwood, with its minty green exterior and original floor-to-ceiling wood-paneled interior. Cat lovers can cuddle up in the 1958 Oasis, which is decked out with funky cat-themed decor, or choose from 90 S-era Airstreams that feature airy, boho-chic interiors. Each trailer comes with an outdoor grill and complimentary cruiser bikes, and a tasting passport connecting you with discounted tasting and bottle purchases at over a dozen local wineries, breweries, and distilleries. You will also enjoy high-speed internet and Roku streaming devices that will keep you connected to modern life, even though you'll feel like you've gone back in time. Fall stays are booking now, and you won't want to miss the resort's Movies on the Lawn series, a month-long celebration of the harvest season featuring outdoor, family-friendly movie screenings, local food trucks, and boutique winery pop-ups on Friday and Saturday nights. Now, through October 31st, get 15% off your stay using promo code FALL. That's FALL at www.the-vintages.com.
Thank you for listening to today's episode of A Life Worth Being. I hope you found it fun and inspiring. And to avoid a bad case of FOMO, please be sure to click that subscribe button. If you love what you heard today, please share it with a friend and then hop on over to your favorite podcast platform and return the love with a wonderful review and 5-star rating. It would truly mean the world to me. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and on my website, links below in the show notes. I appreciate you, and I will see you next week for more fresh insights on awakening a life worth being.